So if you didn't know, I love audiobooks, and I really wanted to share a list of some of my favorite audiobooks for you. I have done this video in the past, and I really enjoyed making it, but there are definitely quite a few more books on that list now because I think I made that video like 2 years ago. So it's been quite a while, and there are definitely more books to add onto the list, and I cannot wait to share them with you. So without further ado, let's get into some of my favorite audiobooks to recommend. The first one is one that I've read fairly recently, and that is Sometime After Midnight by Elle Phillips, and I really enjoyed this book. Basically, it's about these two boys, and they meet each other at this gig. One of the boys is the son of someone who owns a very successful record label, and the other is the son of a rock star who was with that label who ended up killing himself. They don't know each other, but the son of the rock star really doesn't like the record label and doesn't want anything to do with them. But when they meet at this gig, they end up having an instant connection, and one of the boys takes a picture of the other boy's sneakers and then puts them on Instagram trying to find him because they didn't really exchange information or names. And it all goes from there. It's kind of like a Cinderella retelling. This one worked so perfectly, I think, especially since it had the music element to it. I love books about music or musicians or the music industry, and I think that this book really did that very well. And I really liked this audiobook mainly for the narrator. I thought that they did a really great job of doing the two boys' very distinct voices, and it just all worked out so beautifully, especially since the book is split up into two different perspectives. It was just very well done. The next book is one that you guys know I love, and that is A Study in Charlotte by Brittany Cavallaro, and I love these audiobooks so much. If you want to get into this series, I 100% recommend the audiobooks. I did read these books for the first time around as physical books, but I ended up rereading them as audiobooks, and I almost wish that I had started out reading this series as an audiobook because it was just so amazing, and the narrator is just awesome. I love his voice, and he does such a good Jamie. It's just, he's perfect for Jamie. And then because the last book is actually in Charlotte's perspective, we have a different narrator for that one, and it works perfectly. She's the perfect Charlotte, and I just loved everything about these audiobooks. And I'm sure you guys know what A Study in Charlotte is about now. It's about Jamie and Charlotte, and they are like the descendants of Dr. John Watson and Sherlock Holmes, and they meet and they kind of get into a lot of like different dramas and different little mysteries, and it's so much fun. I love the series, and you definitely need to check it out if you're interested. The next book is one that I've also read recently, and that is Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson, and I loved this audiobook so much. It literally broke me, and I feel like this is a book that you kind of have to go in not knowing a lot of stuff about it. Basically, it's about this girl named Claudia, and she is really good friends with this girl named Monday. When it's the first day of school, Claudia goes back to school, and Monday is not there, and no one knows where she is, and no one really cares where she is. And it's all about Claudia trying to figure out what happened to Monday. And it's so good, so heartbreaking, and there are like a bunch of trigger warnings for death and child abuse, stuff like that. You definitely need to be aware of that. But I loved this book with my entire being. I loved it so much. And the audiobook really heightened the experience for me. I feel like if I had read it physically, it might not have had the same impact because the narrator did such an amazing job, and she was really able to portray those emotions so perfectly. And I just loved it. I think it's just such a great experience on audiobook, and I was sobbing by the end of it. It was so good and so heartbreaking and so realistic. It was just this incredible story, and it was definitely one I could relate to, not necessarily on like the whole, because I've never had a friend disappear like that, but I have had a friendship very similar to Claudia and Monday's, and so that was like kind of like another added little bit of me being totally heartbroken by the story, but it was so good and so worth it, so I definitely recommend you check it out. The next book is one I've actually listened to on audiobook twice, and that is The Afterlife of Holly Chase by Cynthia Hand, and I love this book so much. It's my new like Christmas tradition to reread this book. It's just so well done, and the audiobook is amazing. I don't know why, there's something about the voice of that narrator that is so perfect for Holly Chase. Like, she sounds like a real person instead of just like a character, because I feel like Holly Chase, if I'd read the book physically, she might have just come off as like this caricature of a person. But listening to the audiobook, it really gave life to Holly Chase. It's basically a retelling of A Christmas Carol. I've never read A Christmas Carol. I've never even seen any of the movies, but I kind of like know the general story. So I feel like if you know the general story, you don't really have to read anything beforehand. Just go right into the book. It's so good. It's so funny. And I don't know, I just loved it, especially the ending. The ending always gets me to cry. I don't know why. It's not like a super emotional book overall, but there's something about seeing Holly as a character progress throughout the story that is just so heartwarming. I don't know, it's just such a cute book, and I love it so much, and I love Holly Chase, and the audiobook is just fantastic, and I feel like it's the only way to read the book. The next book I want to recommend is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo, and I actually started this book physically and ended it as an audiobook, and I feel like I should have read the entire thing as an audiobook. Like, from the very beginning, it should have just been an audiobook, because it was so fantastic getting to listen to Alex Stern and her entire story through audiobook. It just worked so well, and it really added to the atmospheric element of the book. And I don't know, I think it just works better as an audiobook. I feel like so many of these books are just absolutely made for audio. It's just so funny. There's just certain books that just sound better rather than being read. And basically, Ninth House is about Alex Stern, and she is going to Yale, and she has these special abilities where she can see ghosts, and it's just a lot of drama and mayhem and things that happen, and like dark secrets of Yale and the Yale societies, and it's just so awesome. I don't know, I love Alex Stern, and I just love her story, and her backstory is so interesting as well. And there are just so many layers to this book that I can't wait to explore within the coming sequels. And I don't know, this book really just works well as an audiobook. The next one is kind of an old favorite, and that is The Selection by Kiera Cass. And you guys know that I reread this series last year, and I refound my love for The Selection. It's such a fantastic series, and it's definitely one that I feel like everybody on BookTube needs to read at least once. It's so cute, it's so well done, it's such an interesting semi-dystopian book, but it's like all about, you know, love and dresses and intrigue, and it's so good. I don't know why I love this series. It's just so sweet and so fluffy and so sparkly, and it's just wonderful. And if you're looking for a good audiobook to just like zoom right through, put it on 2x speed, you're gonna get done with it in one sitting, it's definitely The Selection. Like, that is such a good book, and I know that once you finish it, you're going to want to listen to all of the books on audiobook. And I know that I found all of them on Hoopla, and it was just such an amazing experience. I literally read all 5 of the books, and it was just the best time of my life. If you don't know what The Selection is, it's basically The Bachelor, but set in the future, and it involves these like American royals, and it's just wonderful. And I love America Singer. She's the main character, and they have this very interesting caste system, and America is from one of the lower castes. And she gets chosen for the selection, so she gets to join like 35 other girls, and they go to the palace and they meet Max and Shreve, and it's wonderful. I love this story so much. I love this series, and I definitely recommend that everybody read this book. If you haven't read it yet, you need to read it. The next one was my all-time favorite book, or was it my all-time favorite book? I can't remember, but it was one of my all-time favorite books of last year, and that is The 7 or 8 Deaths of Stella Fortuna by Juliet Grimes, and I love this book with my entire being. It is amazing. It follows the birth, life, and death of Stella Fortuna, and it is incredible. It is such an expansive story. It follows even before her birth, what her mother experienced. And it kind of goes through her mother's generation, through Stella's generation, and even the generation after her. And it just works so beautifully. It is so well done. And there's so many layers to this book. It feels like it's almost like a series because it's so expansive, but it's just so beautifully done. It is historical fiction. So I feel like historical fiction and fantasy can be a little hard to follow on audiobooks sometimes, but The 7 or 8 Deaths of Stella Fortuna was so easy. It really felt like you were being told someone's family history, and it was so incredibly interesting. It was just so wonderful. It's about these Italian immigrants who come to America and they make their life here, and there's so much family drama. And if you know me, I love family drama. It's one of my favorite tropes, and it's just so well done. And this audiobook is just so mesmerizing. It is perfect. Like literally just, if you have a free day, just like make yourself a drink, make yourself a coffee, something like that, and sit back and relax, put on the audiobook, and it will take you to this incredible journey throughout this family's history. And it's just so wonderful. I loved it. The next audiobook to recommend is With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo, and I loved this book so much. It's about this Afro-Latinx teenager, and she is also a teen mom, but she also loves to cook food and she wants to be a chef, and she has a lot of these big dreams, but she feels like she can't pursue all of her dreams mainly because she wants to take care of her daughter and she wants to put her daughter first. But her grandma is there with her, and she kind of pushes her to pursue her dreams and to go to college and to become a chef, and it's just so wonderful. And I loved it so much. I loved all the descriptions of food, and I loved all of the recipes that were kind of like mixed in within the story. And I feel like the recipes kind of work a little bit better if you're reading it physically, but if you're not really like focused on the recipes, then just read the audiobook because it's so wonderful. And I love to listen to Elizabeth Acevedo's books as audiobooks. She also has another one that I really love, and that's The Poet X. So really, if you're looking for a good audiobook, you should know that Elizabeth Acevedo has some of the best ones. And the very last audiobook to recommend is one of my favorites, and that is The Sun is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. And I love this book so much. It literally destroyed me. It made me cry so hard. I read it in one sitting. Well, I listened to it in one sitting, and I loved it so much. It was such a wonderful audiobook, and the narrator did such an amazing job, and this story is so hard to kind of put into like a one sentence like pitch. It's so much more than just one sentence. It's so much more than just one description. I feel like this is one of the most impactful books that I've ever read, and it was so beautiful. Like I even want to cry just thinking about it because it just like, it hit me so hard emotionally. And basically it's about this girl and her family is going to be deported tomorrow, and she is trying her very best to make sure that her family does not get deported. And she ends up running into this Korean American boy, and they have this adventure together for one day, and they fall in love, and it's just so wonderful. It's one of the best representations of not really love at first sight, but just like a whirlwind romance. It's kind of like insta love, but done super, super well. It's just so wonderful. I loved it. There was so much passion and heart within this book, and it dealt with so many great, like really pressing issues, and it was just wonderful. I loved it so much. The audiobook is fantastic. It's very short, so it's really easy just to kind of breeze right through it, but it's not going to be one of those books that like you read and then you forget about. It will literally stick with you forever. It is just so amazing. And once you're done with the audiobook, go see the movie. I don't know where you can find the movie, probably on like Amazon or Google or whatever. I don't know where people find movies. I don't really watch movies very often, but I did see the movie in theaters when it came out, and I loved it. It was amazing. And so I definitely recommend that audiobook and that movie. So before I go, I figured I would give you guys some recommendations for audiobook apps. And one of them, of course, is going to be Audible. Like, that's probably the most well-known one, but I feel like it's kind of also one of the most expensive ones. So it's about like $14 a month, and you only get one audiobook. So the next one would be Scribd, and that's also a pretty well-known one as well. And that one I think is about either $8 or $9 a month, and you get technically unlimited audiobooks, but that has an asterisk because you really only get to read like 3 or 4 audiobooks a month. So it's kind of limiting. And then you also have the audiobook apps that are kind of through your library. So my library has Hoopla. That's probably my favorite one. You get 10 different things to check out for the month. And it really does last. Like, I think that is a pretty good number. I don't typically exceed 10 books a month, and I especially don't exceed 10 audiobooks a month. So it's a pretty good number, and I don't feel really stifled by it. And at least for my library, they have a really, really amazing selection of books. And they definitely have like things that are older, things that are super, super new. So it's a really interesting mixed bag, but I think it's a really great selection. And then you also have apps like Libby and Overdrive. Those are also through your library. I'm not a big fan of Libby, but I have used it in the past and it's perfectly fine. I don't really have any issues with it. I don't think I've ever used Overdrive specifically. Libby's okay. It's not my favorite. It has a pretty good selection of audiobooks, but the thing is that it's like a library. So if someone checks out a book from Libby, you're gonna have to wait for it. Whereas with like Scribd or Hoopla, if you decide you want to listen to an audiobook, you can just do it immediately. You don't have to wait for someone to return it. So I think that's kind of like the benefit to Hoopla, but it just really depends on what your library is like and what your library's like audiobook library is like. So it really just depends, and I would definitely recommend like shopping around. I'll have a link for Scribd down below, and I think that there's probably like a 2-month trial or a 1-month trial or something like that, and you can definitely use that down below. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it was kind of a longer video. I gave, I think, about like 10 audiobook recommendations, but I'm going to try to cut it down. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, go ahead and give it a like and subscribe to my channel. Also, go ahead and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Goodreads, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!